Israelites being Israelite foreigners scattered across the four corners of the earth, including within America, Babylon the Great, the main place for captivity. And we are the Most High, Yahweh, chosen people of the nation of Israel. So without further ado, as always, Lashwan Kadash, being the holy tongue, is in the Paleo Hebrew, meaning the ancient Hebrew. I'm going to give all praises, glory, infinite honor to my power, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who was God of the living, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Baruch Kodash, meaning all praise to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, in the name of his only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, and the Holy Spirit, who was our strength and our Redeemer, and our light and our salvation. In the same tongue, I'm going to utter my Shana Kabwadium, Lahasaquanium, Shal, Galarawakab, meaning double honors to the apostles and elder bishops, a great millstone, for teaching willing well. And Shalom, honors and salutations to Bayashad Abadah, the house of David, of the one-third elect remnant of the nation of Israel, along with the rest of the one-third elect men and women and children of Israel. Our fellow servant Malak Rayab, back at it again with another lesson through the spirit of prophecy, being a testimony of our Lord and Savior, Hamashiach Habashai, who the master of the world ignorantly refers to as Jesus Christ. And it's a quick geopolitical and geoeconomical, World War III algorithm update, centered around the Strait of Hormuz, and the skirmishes between the U.S.-Israeli coalition and Iran further escalating. Then this recent report, reported several hours ago that I initially heard from, reported, from a geoeconomical, analysis update by Myron Gaines on YouTube. And let me do a little bit of digging and some research and, put this epistle together, this Harmagadwan update, referring to the Battle of Harmagadwan in Revelation, the 16th chapter, which is moderately known as World War III. Okay, that will precede the next major prophecy, which is the mark of the beast, being that ship. All right. So everything that's going on right now is being orchestrated by the bankers, the Zionist bankers, all right, the biblical Amalekites of the nation of Edom, to bring forth the end of this current monetary system and to, to digitalize, this new wave, transaction, or this new way of living, by, bringing forth this dystopian totalitarian technocracy, by implanting that, the vast majority of the people of this earth with that implantable device, that grain and rice device, that chip. All right. So this is all a part of the Hegelian dialectic of Esau Edom, to eventually bring forth this MOTB, which is why we keep hearing about it that much more steadfastly in these last days, that'll eventually lead into this last world's war. All right. So this is why the gas price is being further affected. All right. The price of energy in general, the supply chain. All right. And other, precious commodities and so forth being shipped through these particular choke points, such as the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, and so forth. They're all being affected by this U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. So this is an update on Global Times, and it's entitled, Iran says U.S. attacks Iranian vessels, civilian areas. It says Iran's main military command, Qatim al-Anbaya Central Headquarters, said Thursday night, the U.S. Army attacked 2 Iranian vessels near the Strait of Hormuz and concurrently carried out airstrikes on civilian areas in the southern Iranian province of Hormozgan and Qashim Island, in cooperation with some regional states. So it goes on to say, the attacks by the U.S. aggressive and terrorist army violated the ceasefire between Iran and the United States, said Ibrahim Zolfakari, the headquarters spokesman, according to Iranian media. Now I'm jump down here. It says one of the targeted vessels was an oil tanker sailing from Iran's territorial waters near Jask toward the Strait of Hormuz, and the other was entering the waterway near Fujairah in the United Arab Emirates. Zolfakari said, adding that the targeted civilian areas were located in Bandari, Kamir, and Sariq, both in Hormozgan province. All right. And Shabbat Shalom to the brother Malak and the comment board. What the water for tuning in, beloved. Yahweh Shem and Shabbat. So speaking of these targeted vessels, all right, including the one they mentioned within Ajask, all right, toward the Strait of Hormuz, all right, is going into, both of these areas, the Fujairah, based out of the the area of the United Arab Emirates, and Ajask, which is an area based out of Iran, serving as two key strategic oil export terminals located just outside the Strait of Hormuz, which is really a design, to allow, oil and refined products to reach international markets, despite the Strait of Hormuz being shut down. So this simply means that these alternative oil routes and means of exporting oil outside of the Strait of Hormuz are being affected. And this, this is why there was an oil facility that was just struck recently by Iran, okay, with the United Arab Emirates. Okay, shortly around a time where the United Arab Emirates had announced that they were separated themselves from OPEC and OPEC Plus, which are major oil producing entity. So this is gonna this is gonna exponentially increase oil even more than what it is right now, being that oil is as high as it's been, in 4 years, since the height of the beginning of the Ukraine proxy war. All right. So all hell is breaking loose, centered around this Strait of Hormuz situation. And it's only going to get worse. All right. By way of the pompous rhetoric that is coming out of the West, mainly Pete Hegseth, a damn alcoholic, Warhawk, and DJT. All right. So get this first precept, St. Matthew 24:6, and it reads, "And ye shall hear wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." So these are wars and rumors of wars that we were prophesied to hear within the ending times of the final hour of Esau's rulership within these perilous times that we're living in. All right. So this is why these war drums are beating louder and louder, because it spells doom for Esau Edom's rulership. It's just prophesied in 2nd Esdras, the 13th chapter. How doom, that doom will fall on the heads of these devils, man. Okay, and that's why they're going to be hiding underground in the underground bunkers. All right, prophesied in Revelation, the 6th chapter, hiding from the face of the Lamb, because these devils know what they have coming to them. But they masquerade that fear, with pompousness and pride, to gaslight the public, mainly within the U.S., to believing that America has it all under control. Which is why Trump has been, claiming that the negotiation, the peace negotiation talks are still on with Iran, which Iran has publicly come out many times and refuted those negotiation claims by DJT, because they're far beyond the point of dialogue at this point. By all the carnality and destruction that Esau has inflicted upon Iran, including taking out the former Ayatollah, taking out the top Iranian military general Soleimani 6 years ago. All right. You're damn near taking out the entire military chain of command of Iran's proxy militia, Hezbollah, including Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah. So, and the list goes on with all the wickedness this devil has perpetuated in the earth, especially towards his enemies, to where these nations are furbishing their swords. Even these, America's enemies, okay, or, allies rather, are furbishing their swords, okay, against America, okay, like Saudi Arabia, denying America access to their airspace, okay, so that further confirms that Esau is losing his leverage in the earth, because that spirit of bondage of Egypt is wearing off, is failing them. All right, this is prophesied in Isaiah the 19th chapter. All right, so this is St. Matthew 24:6 from the top. "And ye shall hear wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. All right. It says, all these are the beginning of sorrows. Okay. So this is not even the tip of the iceberg, because people are still, enjoying their normalcy bias more so in the West, where they, being that they have, they still have running water, electricity, gas. They still have access to go to whatever, eatery, that they desire, to stuff their pie holes, all right, with GMOs, okay, and contaminated water. They still have the luxury to go out there and enjoy bread and circus events, okay. So life is good within the vain perception of these modern day Babylonians and ancient Slakia, the virgin daughter of Babylon, America. Okay, because it doesn't seem like this world is falling apart. It doesn't seem like this system is crumbling. Okay, and it seems that way because the eye salve, was not given to the vast majority, but rather the elect. All right, so where there is no vision, the people perish. Right, it says in Proverbs, and that's the vast majority, because this death by a thousand cuts concept, okay, within this geoeconomical approach to or the geoeconomic approach of war, okay, affecting the world's largest global commodity, being oil, and it producing these petroleum based products that are vital to these particular global economies, such as plastics, pharmaceuticals, and and so forth, is is further affecting the supply chain as a whole. All right, and its overall economy, this overall global economy. All right, so it's an inevitable collapse that's on the horizon, and it's going to affect, everybody. All right, so this is gonna either, lead, people closer to this beast system, and ultimately taking that MOTB, or it's gonna repel, certain people away from the system. And the latter scenario only pertains to the elect of Israel, whose names are predestinated to be written in the book of life, okay, covered by the blood of the Lamb, Yahweh Shai, to not be taken by these snares of death within the world, okay, that will befall many in these last days. All right, so this is Jeremiah 49:20, and it says, therefore hear the counsel of Yahweh by Shem Shai that he had taken against Edom, and his purposes that he had purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least, or Taman, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out, which is the Amalekites, because the Holy Land is not particularly a large geographical landscape or landmass. Okay, all right, so it's on top of that, the Zionist bankers, and even these unorthodox JEWs, all right, are they're a small part of the spectrum, right, in terms of the nation of Edom. Okay, but more so on behalf of the Zionists, okay, operating out of the Holy Land. They're a small city state, so to say. They're a small entity, okay, but yet have so much authority and dominion in the earth. All right. So it says here, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate with them. It says, the earth is moved at the noise of their fall. At the cry, the noise thereof was heard in the Red Sea. And the Red Sea is, it runs through the Mediterranean, or it's connected through the Mediterranean through the Suez Canal, which is not a coincidence for the fact that the Suez Canal is another major shipping area, for international trade. All right, so this is further why these prophecies, these end time prophecies, are further manifesting from the pages of these scriptures in these last days. All right, which is going to force people to acknowledge the power of Yahweh by Shem Yashai. All right, so go back to this information here. It says, I'm going to continue. All right, it says, The Iranian media spokesperson, Ibrahim Zulfikari, had noted that Iran's armed forces immediately retaliated by attacking U.S. military vessels east of the Strait of Hormuz and south of Iran's Chabahar port, causing significant damage to them. So, the reason why this recent report of Iranian vessels in civilian areas being affected or targeted by Esau Edom is a further result of what happened this past Monday. All right, this is reported here. I'm going to bring this out.
U.S. and Iran
on CNN. All right, how they reported that the U.S. had blew up 6 Iranian boats. All right, and then how Iran had hit Navy ships amid that fragile ceasefire. As of April 8th, there was a supposed ceasefire, all right, that the U.S. has breached by attacking Iran, including their oil tankers, their military facilities, and so forth. So it says the fragile ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran that has held for nearly a month is being tested after both sides fired shots in the Strait of Hormuz. All right, this past Monday. All right, on the 4th, it says the U.S. military blew up 6 Iranian boats Monday after Tehran launched multiple cruise missiles, drones, and small boats at American Navy ships and commercial vessels. The U.S. Central Command said. So the U.S. is claiming self-defense. All right, by Iran, launching attacks against the American Navy ships and commercial vessels within that area. All right, because Iran has made it clear, crystal clear, that U.S. and Israeli interference and surveillance within the Strait of Hormuz and the surrounding areas is forbidden. Okay, and if the U.S. and Israeli coalition, decides to embark on the journey of surveillancing those, water spaces around the Strait of Hormuz, anyway, it could cause immediate reaction. Okay, from a military standpoint. All right, so this is why, at DJT, threatened to blow Iran off the face of the earth if it targeted its U.S. Navy ships, which it recently has. All right, so it says here, this is a report on Democracy Now! A few days ago. It says President DJT has warned that Iran will be blown off the face of the earth if U.S. warships are targeted in the Strait of Hormuz. Trump's renewed threat to destroy Iran came as the Pentagon rebranded its war from Operation Epic Fury to Project Freedom, turning its focus to reopening the Strait of Hormuz to commercial traffic. On Monday, Iranian state media said that the U.S. had fired on small cargo boats carrying goods and passengers, deleting 5 civilians. U.S. Central Command confirmed it had attacked several boats, but insisted they were threatening commercial vessels. All right. Separately, the United Arab Emirates said it had come under attack from drones and missiles that caused a fire at an oil facility at the port of Fujairah. The port is outside the Strait of Hormuz and is one of few export routes that doesn't require transiting through the strait. Okay, which it serves as flexibility of transporting goods and oil outside of the Strait of Hormuz. But now those areas are being targeted by the U.S. Okay, strategically. Okay, so it says 3 Indian nationals were injured in the attack. Iran claimed it was not responsible. All right. So once again, the least of the flock is drawing them out, all right, because the U.S. answers to the Israelis, all right, and the Israelis want a regime change in Iran, which is why they eliminated the former Ayatollah, and and ultimately for the goal of seizing their oil sector, just like they did Venezuela as of recently, all right, so go ahead and that's pretty much that on that article. Let's go back here. All right, it says another thing I want to point out was it mentioned Fujairah, all right, and how United Arab Emirates, had their oil facility, recently targeted, at the port of Fujairah. Now, the reason why that's ironic is that this is the same area, Fujairah, okay, that serves as one of the key strategic oil export terminals outside of the Strait of Hormuz, is being targeted by the U.S. as of recently, because a lot of these individuals within these Gulf states, okay, in the so-called Middle East and Western Asia, okay, are in bed, okay, proverbially and geoeconomically with the whore, and through the mainly through the Israeli regime, okay. So it's not a coincidence that the U.S. has been attacking the area of Fujairah, okay, within the United Arab Emirates, when within that same area, the United Arab Emirates oil facility was just targeted, okay, reportedly by Iran, okay. So this can simply mean that the U.S. is retaliating on behalf of the United Arab Emirates, even though Esau has no interest in anybody but himself. But he'll could be a strategic retaliatory effort on behalf of the U.S. in favor of the United Arab Emirates, which is not far-fetched at all. But ultimately, it's Esau Edom, being the covetous niggard that he is, seizing a moment to target critical infrastructure of oil and so forth, so he can put himself in the best position to control the world's largest commodity, because oil is very vital for this so-called living experience. All right, so we're not ignorant of this devil's devices. So it goes on to say here, let me go ahead and jump down. Actually, let me jump up a bit. Salakia. Yeah, I said, read this part again. Well, just to go ahead and reference this first paragraph, where it mentioned how the two Iranian vessels near the Strait of Hormuz and concurrently carried out airstrikes on civilian areas in the southern Iranian province of Hormuzgan and Qasem Island in cooperation with some regional states, which means, there could be more civilian casualties, which means nothing to the self-proclaimed white man, because, he just got done assassinating or, eliminating 175 Iranian schoolgirls in an elementary school. Okay. Shortly after, this war on Iran, further, escalated on February 28th. Okay, so civilian fatalities, nothing to this devil. All right. But the more that these reports come out on Esau attacking, areas, okay, that are compassed with, civilians, so-called innocent civilians, that just further shows how much of a damn devil how much of the damn devil he is. That at the expense of many lives, he will stoop at the lowest of all levels, or the lowest of all lows, to to achieve his satanic NWO agenda. All right, so that's pretty much your point there. Let's jump down to the last part of this information, this article. It says, it says a semi-official Mer news agency reported a U.S. and Israeli attack on a naval base in Minab County in Hormuzgan province early Friday. All right. So now that the U.S. and the U.S.-Israeli coalition attacking, military facilities of Iran, like it's reported here on BBC News, says U.S. says it has targeted Iranian military facilities after responding to attacks on Navy ships, in hopes of further, destroying their means of developing thermonuclear weapons. Okay, by destroying their means of doing so through these military facilities. Okay, that consists of, uranium, that key ingredient to developing thermonuclear weapons. All right. So me go ahead and continue. Book of Joel 3. Matter of fact, let me go back to Jeremiah real quick. Jeremiah 49:21. The earth is moved at the noise of their fall, at the cry, the noise thereof was heard in the Red Sea. Okay, right? Connected through the Mediterranean Sea, through the Suez Canal, in the so-called Middle East, where this last world's war is prophesied to take place. Now, right around these dragons of Arabia, these Muslim nations. Okay, around the Euphrates River. All right, around the Persian Gulf and so forth. So this is Joel 3:9, and it says, proclaiming this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears, let the weak say I'm strong. All right, and so meaning what in other words, transition from plowshares, like a gardening tool, symbolic of farming and agriculture, and into the transition of war, which is what the sword represents. All right. So it says, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say I'm strong. So more of the nations are starting to rise up against the machine, America, Babylon the Great, the hammer of the entire earth. All right. By indulging in military drills such as North Korea, and so forth. All right. Iran, looking to continue to, lay hold on that thermonuclear ingredient, uranium, which is capable of further developing thermonuclear weapons that Trump had rescinded from himself, all right, back in 2018. So obviously he doesn't want peace because his handlers, doesn't want peace because they answer to the Zionist bankers, all right. So this is Joel 3:11. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. They're the cause of mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Yahweh Shaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. All the heathen will be, regarding the military of these heathen nations, will engage in this war in the so-called Middle East that are transition over here to America, Babylon the Great. All right. This is why Esau is popping his gums and beating his chest, because he has no other choice but to do that, because otherwise it'll make him look weak. All right, so I'm gonna play this video. It's a quick video.
Their military is unbelievable. They're doing an unbelievable job. We're negotiating with the Iranians.
And that's obviously Cap. And that's Cap. He's not negotiating with the Iranians. All right.
We have, you probably heard, we took our 3 destroyers and we rammed them through some pretty big stuff today, and we knocked the hell out of them. The destroyers weren't hurt in any way. The people weren't hurt, but they were firing at us, and we were firing back at them. And our firepower was a hell of a lot stronger than theirs, and they knocked the hell out of them.
All right, so there you go. He speaks. He, as it says in Psalm the 10th chapter, he puffs at his enemies. You see, the way this Esau, Edom, the self-proclaimed white man likes to do that is, flexing, through his military might, like him and P. Hex have been doing as of recently. All right, but people starting to see through the facade. All right, because people are becoming more privy to the satanic devices of the devils. All right, so this is the book of Revelation 16:12. And it reads, and the 6th angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up. And that actually happened in real life a few years ago. Okay, another indication of end time prophecy coming to pass. That says that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared, and the way of the kings of the east, all right, representing those in the northeastern hemisphere, all right, including the dragons of Arabia, okay, Russia, North Korea, Saudi, and so forth. Certain Gulf states, okay, really all the Gulf states, all right, because everyone's gonna have to choose a side in this war, either ride with America. Slovakia. Rock with America, or the U.S. the America through the U.S. Israeli regime, or rock with the BRICS Union on behalf of Russia and China and so forth. All right. You're just going to further divide, Esau's rulership by separating him from his allies. A lot of these EU and NATO members of America, okay, desire to continue to do business with Russia, okay, such as benefiting off of their cheap energy, such as oil. Okay, so this is Second Esdras. Salaki, this is Second Esdras 15. Let me see, I'm going to start here. Second Esdras 15 and 28 says, "Behold, in horrible vision, and the appearance thereof from the east, where the nations of the dragons of Arabia shall come out with many chariots, and the multitude of them shall be carried as a wind upon earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble." All right. It says, in point in verse 30, "Also the Carmanians raging in wrath shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians." And the Carmanians are the Iranians. All right. That's why the prefix of Carmanian, all right, Carmania derives back to the term Kurdiman. All right. Which is why it's not a coincidence that that's one of the provinces or towns in Iran. All right. So the Carmanians are the Iranians, the modern-day Iranians, which are the biblical Persians of Elam. All right. It says, "And then shall the dragons have the upper hand, remembering their nature, and if they shall turn themselves, conspiring together in great power to persecute them." All right. And dragons of Arabia. All right. So-called Muslim, all right, the so-called Muslim nations. It says, "Then these shall be troubled, bled, and keep silence through their power, and shall flee. And from the land of the Syrians shall the enemy besiege them, and consume some of them. And in their hosts shall be fear and dread, and strife among their kings." All right. So the modern day Syrians are the Edomites. Okay, the bloodshedders. Okay. So Yahweh Shem Shai is going to permit these Carmanians of Elam, all right, to waste a good portion of these modern day Syrians, all right, which are the Edomites, all right, within this military conflict. It says, verse 34, "Behold, clouds from the east and from the north and to the south, and they are very horrible to look upon, full of wrath and storm." All right. It says, "They shall smite one upon another, and they shall smite down a great multitude of stars upon the earth, which are the nukes, even their own star, and blood shall be from their sword into the belly." All right. Salakia. I'm tired as hell, Salakia. It's this damn flesh. But anyway, it says, Second Esdras 15 and 35, "They shall smite one upon another, and they shall smite down a great multitude of stars upon the earth, even their own star, and blood should be from the sword into the belly." All right, it's going to be, bloodshed, death, destruction in the midst of this last world's war. Okay, coming at the hands of America's fiercest enemies from the east, as is prophesied in Jeremiah 50 and 9, including Iran. It's going to waste the goods of you devils. So this is the book of Sirach, chapter 11, in verse 17. And it reads, "The gift of Yahweh by Shem Shai remaineth with the godly, and his favor bringeth prosperity forever. There is that waxeth rich by his wariness and pinching, and this is a portion of his reward." Here's a point in verse 19. "Whereas he saith, I have found rest, and now will eat continually of my goods, and yet he knoweth not what time shall come upon him, and that he must leave those things to others and die." Okay. And that lines up with Isaiah 33:1, how you definitely be spoiled, okay, by the ones you've been spoiling. Okay. So leave it off in a note. Pray this lesson was for the edifying, exhorting to elect. And give all praises, glory, infinite honor to my power, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whom is God of the living. Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Barach. All right, forgive me the spirit to do this lesson. All right. Well, once again, double honors to the apostles and elder bishops, great millstone, for teaching me well. And shalom, honor and salutations to by Yashidawada, the house of David, scattered across the four corners of the earth, especially within America, Babylon the Great, the main place for our captivity. All right. And at the water Malak. Let me grab some of these precepts the brother put up on the comment board. The brother Malak put up Psalm 140:1. Says, deliver me, O Yahweh, by Shem Yeshai, from the evil man. Preserve me from the violent man. And that's Esau Edom, the man of sin and son of perdition, is in destruction. Okay, he gets a kick off of death and destruction, and bloodshed. All right. It's verse 2. Which imagine mischiefs in their heart, continually are they gathered together for war. All right, because they meditate on destruction. I believe it goes into in Psalm 36:4. All right. Psalm 37:9. For evildoers should be cut off, but those that wait upon Yahweh by Shem Yeshai, they shall inherit the earth. Like Yahweh said, in your patience possess ye your souls. All right, verse 10. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall not be, yea, thou shalt diligently consider his place, and it shall not be. All right, Esau is going to cease to exist, not only as an empire, but as a nation. Okay. All right, after being incinerated after 1,000 years of rulership, after 1,000 years of subjection under the everlasting righteous kingdom of Yahweh by Shem Yeshai, okay, and these devils are going to be destroyed. All right, we're gonna rejoice knowing that there's never going to be another Edomite on the earth. Okay, with the possibility of defiling the earth as much as they have been doing. All right. So they know Esau represents that long disease in Sirach the 10th chapter. Yahweh Shai is going to cut off. All right. By waging war in this devil within his war, within a war in the heaven prophecy in Revelation 12. Okay. Of Yahweh Shai and the angels waging war against Esau and his military. And it's going to result in catastrophic proportions of death and destruction. And in the aftermath of that event will be the deliverance of Yasharallah within that moment. Okay. This is what we long for, man. So the water, for all the tuned in, the water to the brother Malak on the comment board, posting their precepts, skillfully adding on to the, to the epistle. And with that, Abba Ball, soon and very soon, with Mawatha Ball, I'm going to put up a curse against this whore America, Babylon the Great. May Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Barach, Babakshah, Shalak, Rayam, Wa Anashim, Wa Haragium, Wa Mashapadium, Alkal, Adiawamium, Wa Gawayim, Wa Ayabinawa, Babakshah, the water, Dimiyad, Tawab. All right. Shabbat Shalom, and on to the next one.